The skies above Earth darkened, not from the turning of day to night but from the arrival of a monstrous fleet. Alien ships, jagged and pulsating with an eerie green glow, loomed in orbit. They seemed alive, breathing malevolence into the vastness of space. Each vessel dwarfed the largest of human spacecraft, and their numbers blanketed the heavens like a storm. These were the Graldak, a race that thrived on conquest. Known across the galaxy as ruthless warriors, their war record was spotless. Every world they had invaded had fallen, its people either enslaved or annihilated. To them, Earth was no different, a weak planet teeming with soft creatures too primitive to mount any meaningful resistance. Their hubris was palpable as they initiated contact, their arrogance laced into every word. A holographic projection emerged in cities around the world, towering over buildings like a god descending upon its subjects. The image was of the Graldak king, his body encased in shimmering battle armor, his insect-like eyes glinting with disdain. He stood tall and imposing, his voice resonating across every screen, every radio, every communication device humanity owned. "Humans," he began, his tone dripping with mockery, "you stand before the might of the Graldak Empire. You are nothing, dust beneath our feet. Your world is weak, your armies laughable, your existence irrelevant. Surrender your planet, your resources, and your very lives to us. Kneel, or be erased from the stars." The ultimatum was delivered with chilling confidence. In the face of such overwhelming power, most species would crumble. The Graldak had no reason to think humans would react any differently. Behind closed doors, humanity's leaders convened in emergency meetings. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists shared a single, unified fear: extinction. Yet, amid the tension, a rare and powerful consensus emerged. Surrender was not an option. If Earth was to fall, it would do so fighting, tooth and claw. Humanity, fractured and contentious in peacetime, had become unshakably united in the face of annihilation. Across the globe, militaries mobilized, scientists worked around the clock, and civilians volunteered in droves. Weapons were hastily prepared, defenses fortified, and strategies drawn. Messages of defiance spread like wildfire: "We stand together. We will not bow." Humanity's technological disadvantage was glaring, but their determination and adaptability burned brighter than any alien weapon. The Graldak, unimpressed by Earth's resolve, decided to demonstrate their superiority. One of their warships fired a single blast at a nearby asteroid. It was a brief display, over in seconds, but its message was clear. The asteroid disintegrated into nothingness, obliterated so thoroughly that not even dust remained. The Graldak king's voice returned, mocking and cold. "This is but a fraction of our power. Kneel, and you may yet live as slaves. Resist, and you will die forgotten." Humanity's response was simple and unyielding. A single transmission echoed back into the void: "We will not kneel." The Graldak king laughed, a sound that resonated across the frequencies like the grinding of steel. "Fools! You have chosen your extinction. Very well, we shall grant it. Prepare to be obliterated, little humans." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in a tense and deafening silence. The people of Earth looked to the skies, where the Graldak ships loomed like harbingers of doom. Yet amidst the fear, a fire burned. If this was to be humanity's last stand, it would be one that echoed through the stars. The Graldak struck first, as expected, with an overwhelming show of force. Their warships descended from orbit like a storm of death, firing beams of energy that reduced entire city blocks to smoldering craters. Their ground forces followed, hulking warriors encased in impenetrable armor, wielding weapons that vaporized anything in their path. It was chaos, pure and unrelenting, and yet humanity did not falter. Instead of surrendering to panic, humans adapted. With no hope of matching the Graldak's brute strength, they turned to tactics the aliens had never encountered. Guerrilla warfare, honed through centuries of human conflict, became their greatest weapon. Fighter jets, outmatched by Graldak ships in firepower, relied on speed and daring. Pilots used the curvature of the Earth, weaving through mountain ranges and cities, luring Graldak vessels into ambushes. In space, the few human ships that remained launched coordinated attacks, outmaneuvering the larger, slower Graudak cruisers. The Graudak's arrogance became their downfall. Used to enemies crumbling under their superior technology, they were unprepared for an opponent that refused to fight on their terms. Earth's defenders used sabotage, infiltrating Graudak ground operations and disabling critical systems. EMP bursts rendered alien tanks useless, while human engineers turned wreckage into makeshift weapons capable of piercing alien armor. What the Graudak saw as desperation, humanity called innovation. On the ground, battles were a mix of chaos and ingenuity. Civilians armed with improvised explosives fought alongside soldiers, turning urban centers into mazes of traps and ambushes. A Graudak platoon might march into a city unchallenged, only to find themselves surrounded by collapsing buildings, their communications scrambled, their escape cut off. Farmers turned irrigation drones into guided missiles. Mechanics transformed mining equipment into tools of war. Humanity's greatest strength was its creativity, and they wielded it with precision. For the Graudak, war was a sport, a game of domination and conquest. For humans, it was survival. The contrast was stark. Graudak soldiers, bred for combat and trained to view other species as prey, were baffled by the ferocity and purpose behind humanity's resistance. Captured Graudak prisoners expressed disbelief as they watched wounded humans crawl back into the fight, fueled by something the Graudak could not understand: love for family, friends, and freedom. Amid the chaos, humanity's resolve became its most potent weapon. A mother fought to defend her children. A medic risked everything to save a stranger. A pilot, out of ammunition, rammed her ship into an enemy vessel to save her squadron. These were not just acts of defiance, they were acts of humanity. Each moment was a message: we are not your prey. We are not weak, The tide began to shift in the unlikeliest of places, a quiet stretch of space above the Pacific. The Graudak had stationed one of their key command ships there, believing it untouchable. What they didn't anticipate was a coordinated human strike. A dozen smaller ships, cloaked by the planet's magnetic field, converged on the target. It was a perfect blend of strategy and sacrifice. Pilots used decoys to confuse the Graudak's targeting systems, while others flew dangerously close to the command ship, exploiting blind spots in its defenses. In a final, desperate maneuver, a single pilot detonated his ship's core reactor, delivering a devastating blow to the Graudak vessel. The explosion was seen from Earth, a fiery beacon of hope against the darkness of invasion. For the first time, humanity had struck a blow the Graudak could not ignore. It wasn't just a tactical victory, it was symbolic. The Graudak king, watching from his flagship, was livid. The humans were supposed to be easy prey, a species so beneath them that the war should have been over before it began. His response was swift and brutal. The Graudak doubled their efforts, targeting civilian shelters and cultural landmarks in an attempt to break humanity's spirit. Yet, the more they tried to crush Earth, the more unified its people became. Across the planet, acts of resistance intensified. Scientists worked tirelessly to decode alien technology, while underground networks smuggled resources and information to the front lines. Humanity, battered and bloodied, refused to yield. For the Graudak, the war was no longer about conquest. It was about dominance, proving that their empire was unstoppable. For humanity, it had never been about winning. It was about survival. Every battle, every sacrifice, carried the weight of an entire species' future. And though the Graudak still held the advantage, they began to see the cracks in their own invincibility. The first victory wasn't the last. Across Earth and in orbit, humans began to claim more small but decisive wins. Each one chipped away at the myth of the Graudak's superiority, leaving the invaders with a troubling realization: this was not a war they could win easily. And if the Graudak king's fury was any indication, it was a war that might cost them far more than they had anticipated. The plan was audacious, bordering on impossible. Infiltrating the Graudak mothership, a fortress of steel and energy floating miles above Earth, was a task no sane tactician would propose. Yet, desperate times called for extraordinary risks. A coalition of the world's best minds had spent weeks crafting the operation. Scientists decrypted fragments of Graaldak technology. Engineers designed experimental cloaking devices. Hackers pieced together data stolen from captured Graaldak equipment. Soldiers volunteered for what they knew could be a one-way mission. The objective was simple in theory but daunting in execution: breach the Graaldak flagship, locate their king, and capture him alive. Humanity's survival hinged on this gambit. Without their leader, the invaders might fracture, buying Earth time to turn the tide of the war. The strike team consisted of a diverse group: soldiers hardened by weeks of combat, engineers tasked with operating the advanced gear, and hackers guiding the mission from within a heavily shielded command center on Earth. Every detail was planned meticulously, down to the exact timing of each maneuver. They would use a stolen Graaldak shuttle to slip past the fleet's defenses, relying on their patched-together cloaking tech to mask their approach. Once aboard, they had only a narrow window to act before the ship's systems would detect the intrusion. The infiltration began under the cover of Earth's shadow, the shuttle gliding silently toward the mothership. Inside, the team was grim but focused. Each member knew the stakes, understood the cost of failure. As the shuttle docked with the massive vessel, they moved quickly, bypassing security protocols and slipping into the labyrinthine corridors of the ship. The air inside was heavy, almost oppressive, the walls lined with alien glyphs that pulsed faintly with energy. The first challenge came almost immediately. Graaldak patrols were everywhere, their hulking forms casting long shadows in the dimly lit corridors. The humans had prepared for this, using portable jammers to disrupt the ship's surveillance systems and avoiding direct confrontations whenever possible. Still, the tension was suffocating. Every step felt like a gamble, every corner a potential ambush. At one point, a malfunction in their cloaking device forced them to take cover in a maintenance shaft as a Graaldak squad passed by. The humans held their breath, their makeshift weapons clutched tightly. The seconds stretched into eternity before the aliens moved on, their guttural voices fading into the distance. It was a small victory, but there was no time to celebrate. Navigating the mothership's interior was like traversing a living maze. The Graaldak's design was alien in every sense, with twisting corridors that seemed to shift subtly, as if the ship itself were aware of the intruders. The team relied on data extracted from captured Graaldak prisoners, but even that was incomplete. At one critical juncture, they found themselves facing a locked bulkhead with no way forward. Time was slipping away, and failure was not an option. Improvisation became their saving grace. The engineers worked furiously, rewiring the alien door controls using human tools and scraps of Graaldak tech. Sparks flew as they bypassed the system, and the bulkhead groaned open just as the ship's alarms began to stir faintly. They pressed on, knowing the clock was now ticking faster than ever. The king's chamber was at the heart of the ship, heavily guarded and shielded by layers of defenses. Reaching it required neutralizing a power grid that controlled the inner sanctum's security measures. The hackers back on Earth coordinated the effort, feeding the team live data and guiding them through a series of increasingly dangerous obstacles. At one point, they encountered a force field blocking their path. With no time for subtlety, the team detonated a small charge, the explosion echoing through the ship like a thunderclap. They moved quickly, knowing the noise would attract attention. When they finally reached the king's chamber, the sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The room was massive, its walls lined with alien symbols that pulsed with a sickly green light. At its center stood the Graaldak king, encased in armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. He was flanked by 2 elite guards, their weapons crackling with energy. The king turned slowly as the humans entered, his gaze filled with contempt. "So, the insects have crawled into the lion's den," he sneered, his voice a rumble that seemed to shake the very air. "You are brave, but foolish. Did you think you could challenge the might of the Graaldak and live?" The team wasted no time. They opened fire, their weapons calibrated to penetrate Graaldak armor. The room erupted into chaos as the guards charged, their massive forms moving with surprising speed. The humans split into teams, some engaging the guards while others focused on subduing the king. It was a desperate, brutal fight. One soldier was struck down by an energy blast, his body collapsing before he could scream. Another was nearly crushed by a guard's blade, saved only by a teammate's well-placed shot. The king, for all his arrogance, was not invincible. He fought fiercely, his strength overwhelming but his movements predictable. The humans had studied him, analyzed his tactics. Using a combination of precision strikes and sheer determination, they wore him down. A final, well-coordinated attack brought him to his knees, his armor scorched and his weapon shattered. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes. "You think this will stop us?" he snarled, even as restraints were locked around his wrists. "You may have captured me, but my people will burn your world to ash." The humans ignored his threats, dragging him from the chamber. The alarms were blaring now, and the ship was in chaos. Without their king to command them, the Graldak forces faltered, unsure of how to respond. The humans made their escape, fighting their way back to the shuttle with the king in tow. As the shuttle broke free of the mothership, explosions rippled across the Graldak fleet. Confusion had turned into panic, and the once unbeatable invaders were now a disorganized swarm. On Earth, cheers erupted as the team returned, battered but victorious, with the king bound and defeated. It was not the end of the war, but it was a turning point, one that would echo through the stars. The shuttle's descent to Earth was met with a mixture of awe and tension. Inside, the Graldak king sat in silence, his once imposing armor stripped away, replaced by restraints designed to counter his incredible strength. His insect-like eyes darted between his captors, studying them with a simmering blend of contempt and unease. Despite his defeat, his arrogance remained intact, or so it seemed. When they landed, the king was handed over to a specially assembled global tribunal, but not before the world had its moment to confront him. Humanity had suffered deeply under the Graldak invasion, families torn apart, cities reduced to rubble, cultures scarred forever. Now, the figurehead of that devastation stood before them, captured and powerless. The streets of a battered but defiant Earth filled with people as the king was paraded through the ruins of a once bustling metropolis. Soldiers flanked him on all sides, their weapons ready, though the crowd's anger seemed more dangerous than any external threat. Survivors of the war lined the procession, their faces a mosaic of emotions, grief, fury, and an almost cathartic triumph. Some shouted curses, their voices hoarse from weeks of screaming in underground bunkers or battlefields. Others wept silently, clutching photographs of loved ones who hadn't lived to see this day. A few simply stared, their expressions unreadable, as if trying to comprehend how such a monstrous being could look so mortal, so small. The king, dragged along on a heavily reinforced platform, tried to maintain his composure. His posture was rigid, his gaze defiant. But the weight of the moment was undeniable. For the first time in his life, he was no longer the predator but the prey. Humans threw debris at his path, shards of their broken homes, symbols of the lives he had destroyed. The clang of metal and glass against the platform reverberated through the air. And yet, among the jeers and roars of the crowd, there were voices of dissent. "Is this who we are now?" one woman called out, her voice rising above the din. She was ignored by most but heard by enough. A debate had begun to ripple through humanity in the wake of the king's capture. Some argued that he deserved nothing less than public execution, a display of vengeance that would send a clear message to the Graldak. Others insisted on a trial, advocating for justice over bloodlust. "We must show them we're better than this," one man pleaded to a nearby group, holding a sign that read, "Justice, not revenge." Even the king, arrogant as ever, sensed the conflict. "You revel in this barbarity," he sneered at his captors as the procession paused. "Your screams, your hatred, it makes you no different from us. You claim to fight for freedom, yet here I am, a prisoner paraded like a trophy. Hypocrites." But his words had little impact. For most, this was not a celebration of cruelty, it was a reckoning, a statement of defiance. As the crowd surged forward, the king's arrogance began to falter. The sheer weight of humanity's grief and anger was unlike anything he had faced. His wars had always been fought from a distance, his enemies crushed long before they could stand before him like this. Now, he was confronted with the raw aftermath of his actions. Far above, aboard the fractured remnants of the Graldak fleet, the king's humiliation was being broadcast. Graldak soldiers, once loyal to their leader without question, watched in stunned silence. The sight of their invincible king being paraded like a common criminal shook the foundation of their beliefs. For some, it ignited fury, a desire to redouble their efforts and avenge their leader. For others, it planted seeds of doubt. What kind of ruler led them into a war they could not win? What kind of empire allowed this to happen? Aboard one of the command ships, a Graldak officer turned to his subordinate, his mandibles clicking nervously. "They are not like the others," he said, his voice heavy with something bordering on admiration. "No species has ever defied us like this." The subordinate hesitated before responding, her gaze fixed on the screen. "Perhaps, we are the ones who have been wrong." On Earth, the parade continued, its symbolism growing with every step. This was not just about humiliating the Graldak king. It was a message to every corner of the galaxy: humanity was not weak. They were not prey. They had faced annihilation and stood their ground. Every shard of rubble under the king's feet, every voice in the crowd, was a testament to human resilience. But resilience came with its own burden. As the king was dragged through streets lined with banners proclaiming unity and strength, the cracks in humanity's moral armor were impossible to ignore. Could they claim to be better than their oppressors when they reveled in his suffering? Could they justify the hatred that now defined their victory? The king, for all his defiance, could feel the weight of these questions. Though his lips curled in disdain, there was a flicker of doubt in his alien eyes. He was no longer certain of his superiority, no longer sure of the inevitability of his empire's triumph. As the procession reached its end, the king was pulled into a secure facility, his fate to be decided by the leaders of Earth. But outside, the debates raged on. Humanity had won a significant battle, but the war was far from over, both against the Graldak and within themselves. The dragging of the king through the streets had become a defining moment, one that encapsulated both their greatest strength and their deepest flaws. The crowd dispersed, leaving behind the echoes of their chants and the weight of their collective grief. For humanity, this was not just an ending but a beginning. The scars of war would take generations to heal, but the message had been sent: Earth would not bow, not to the Graldak or to anyone else. And though their path forward was uncertain, they would walk it together, stronger for having faced the abyss and survived. The Graldak fleet, fractured and leaderless, began its slow retreat from Earth's orbit. Fires burned across their once mighty armada, the scars of a war they had arrogantly assumed would be over in days. Their soldiers, bred for dominance, now moved with uncertainty, their ranks hollowed by relentless human resistance. For the first time in centuries, the Graldak Empire had been defeated, not by superior technology or overwhelming force, but by the ingenuity and resolve of a species they had underestimated. Humanity's triumph was hard-won. Earth itself bore the marks of the war, cities reduced to rubble, landscapes scarred by battles that had raged across continents. Millions mourned the dead, their grief etched into the collective memory of a planet that had come so close to extinction. But amidst the sorrow, there was pride. Humanity had faced annihilation and emerged victorious. The Graldak's departure brought relief, but also a sense of unfinished business. Their king, once a symbol of unstoppable tyranny, now sat in a high-security facility deep beneath the Earth's surface. Stripped of his power, he was forced to watch as humanity began the arduous process of rebuilding. Screens surrounding his cell broadcast scenes of survivors clearing rubble, planting seeds in scorched earth, and lifting one another out of despair. It was a deliberate gesture, a reminder that despite all he had taken from them, humanity endured. The king, once defiant, had grown silent. The humiliation of his capture, the sight of his fleet's retreat, and the resilience of his enemies had stripped him of his arrogance. He no longer spat venomous taunts or vowed revenge. Instead, he watched in silence as humanity proved, over and over, that they were not the fragile prey he had once believed. As Earth's skies cleared and its people began to heal, a decision was made to send a message to the stars. Humanity's leaders gathered in a newly constructed chamber, a symbol of global unity forged in the fires of war. Standing before cameras that broadcast their words across the galaxy, they delivered a statement that was equal parts warning and invitation. To any who may hear this, the message began, the voice calm but resolute, "We are the people of Earth. We have faced extinction, yet we stand. We have been tested, yet we endure. To those who come in peace, we extend our hand in friendship. But to those who would seek to conquer us, know this, we will never kneel. We will fight for our freedom, for our future, and for the generations yet to come. Let this be a message to the stars, humanity is not prey. We are a force that will not be broken." The broadcast was carried on all available frequencies, sent through captured Graaldak technology to reach deep into space. It was both a declaration of survival and a challenge. Humanity would no longer be seen as an isolated and vulnerable species. They had entered the galactic stage with bloodied hands and unbroken hearts. As the message echoed across the galaxy, humanity turned its attention inward. The process of rebuilding was monumental, but the war had left behind a unity that made the impossible seem achievable. Nations that had once been divided worked side by side. Engineers repaired vital infrastructure, farmers replanted devastated fields, and scientists shared knowledge freely. What the Graaldak had intended to destroy had, in fact, been strengthened. Amid the rebuilding efforts, there were celebrations of survival. Streets once filled with rubble now echoed with music and laughter as humanity honored its fallen and its fighters. Stories of heroism spread like wildfire, inspiring a new generation to value courage, creativity, and perseverance. In the facility where the Graaldak king was held, the guards noticed a change in their prisoner. He no longer spoke of his empire's superiority or humanity's inferiority. Instead, he spent hours watching the broadcasts of Earth's recovery. One day, as he watched a group of children plant a tree in a field that had once been a battlefield, he muttered under his breath, "They are not like any prey we've known." The words were recorded, analyzed, and eventually shared with Earth's leaders. They became a symbol of the transformation not just of the king but of humanity's place in the galaxy. The Graaldak had come expecting to crush a weak and fractured species. Instead, they had found a foe unlike any other, one that valued its freedom and unity above all else. As the stars once again shone bright in Earth's night sky, humanity reflected on the challenges ahead. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknown dangers and opportunities. The war with the Graaldak had shown them both their vulnerabilities and their strengths. They knew the journey ahead would be fraught with peril, but they also knew they would face it together. The final words of the galactic broadcast lingered in the minds of those who heard them, both on Earth and beyond. For humanity, it was a promise. For the Graaldak and any other would-be conquerors, it was a warning. And so, Earth turned its gaze upward, no longer just a planet but a symbol, a beacon of resilience in a galaxy that now knew the strength of the human spirit.